In July of 2025, at 77 years old, Kathy Bates arrived on the set of Matlock to find the entire cast and crew waiting for her with flowers. The showrunner Jenny Snyder-Urman was in tears. The co-stars were holding bouquets. Someone had organized a celebration that nobody had announced. Because nobody had known it was coming until the Emmy nominations were released that morning, and Kathy Bates' name was on the list, not for the first time. Not even for the 10th time, but for the 14th time. And this time as the oldest person in the history of the award to be nominated for lead actress in a drama series. She broke Angela Lansbury's record by 7 years. Angela Lansbury, who held the record at 70 for playing Jessica Fletcher in Murder, she wrote, Kathy Bates broke it at 77 for playing a woman pretending to be a sweet little old country lawyer while secretly running a one-person intelligence operation to destroy the law firm that covered up the pharmaceutical company that caused her daughter's death. She stood in the middle of the flowers and the tears and said she had no expectations. She said she hadn't seen the showrunner's previous series, Jane the Virgin, which she had heard was very successful. She said, of the Emmy nomination, it's a badge of honor. She said it with the flat, dry delivery of a woman who has been describing the world accurately for 50 years and has developed very little patience for the alternative. That is Kathy Bates. And what the flowers and the tears and the 77-year-old Emmy record do not contain, what the cameras in the room could not capture, and what the Variety profile only approached from the side, is the story of what she went through to get to that morning. Not through talent, not through persistence in the abstract motivational sense, through 20 years of being told she was the wrong kind of woman, through 2 cancers, through a disease she had to teach herself to advocate for because her doctors had not been trained to see it, through a retirement she almost chose and then didn't, because a script arrived on a Friday and she sat down to read it, and by the end she was looking at a bulletin board full of photographs and thinking, this is thrilling. Have you ever been the person who built something, created it, developed it, inhabited it so completely that it became inseparable from you, and then had to watch someone else walk off with it while you remained where you were? Because that is the experience Kathy Bates repeated across 2 decades of theatrical work, before the industry discovered what the theater already knew. En understandi fununut medicus, in ororatucur mavir oritovidia, lot naresamos anafilidi metasayate nonosaya ridia. Verum Memphis Q1. Dorum Memphis hahaderdiustor riis, in 1948. In a household, her a mechanical engineer and a homemaker arrasas tu thridia. Anarrasejomos aya toporidirgedno frosnersadi, that a household urenolor nemase tu quite etetametu getoritis. Kathleen Doyle Bates was born on the 28th of June, 1948, in Memphis, Tennessee, the youngest of 3 daughters, the late and unplanned addition to a family that had already settled into its shape. Her sisters were 9 and 15 years older. Her father was born in 1900. Her mother in 1907. The generational gap produced a childhood with a specific texture of a household that was watching history from a safe distance. Conservative, southern, conventional, privately warm. Bates has described as lerfadier, piliner acting to the cons, boreolopolabadia, that igun note conventionally attractive. Do has described lorestorne liter. Bores sleiptet ketorayer scradies, in interviews, without drama, as a fact among facts. Denostatique nosus fanno socia palloraphidia. She discovered acting through high school plays, the way most theater people discover it, by accident, by dare, by the experience of being on a stage, and understanding suddenly that this was the architecture of the world she was supposed to live in. She arrived at Southern Methodist University, in Dallas, and changed her major several times while her father watched the tuition accumulating and waited for her to land on something practical. She has described the moment at orientation when the dean gave a speech about doing what you loved most, and the way something clicked into place inside her that has never clicked out. She graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Theater in 1969, and in 1970 she moved to New York City and became what the theater calls a gypsy, which means someone who lives in the work, moves with the work, and makes the work the primary fact of their existence, regardless of what the work pays. New York in 1970 was not waiting for Kathy Bates. She worked a cash register. She took lunch orders. She auditioned for roles that went to other women and performed in productions that critics occasionally attended and that left no lasting mark on the commercial world. She was, by every account of those who worked with her, extraordinary. The roles that came to her were not extraordinary, and the industry's mechanism for determining what was extraordinary was, in 1970, in 1975, in 1980, a mechanism that required a specific kind of face and a specific kind of body and a specific kind of romantic legibility. And Kathy Bates fulfilled none of those requirements, and the industry communicated this to her in ways both blunt and structural, for 20 years. Have you ever been excellent at something and been looked past, not once, as a mistake, but consistently, as a policy, and had to decide whether the excellence was worth continuing in a room that could not fully see it? Because that is the question Kathy Bates lived inside for 2 decades. And what she chose every time was to keep building the work anyway, not in bitterness, not in the performance of fortitude, simply because the work was what she was made of, and she had not yet found sufficient reason to be made of something else. In 1983, she originated the role of Jessie Cates in Marcia Norman's Night, Mother on Broadway, a play about a woman who tells her mother she intends to end her life before the evening is over, and the 90-minute conversation between them that follows. The role required everything Bates had built across 15 years: the stillness, the interior weight, the ability to hold something devastating in the body without showing the audience the mechanism of the holding. The production won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. Bates received a Tony nomination for Best Lead Actress in a Play. It was, by every theatrical measure, her role. When the film adaptation went into production, the studio cast Sissy Spacek. Bates has said, of the night, Mother decision, "It's a shame. We had been working on those characters for almost 3 years. I feel we deserved to be in the film." She said it without bitterness. She said it as a fact. In 1987, she originated the role of Frankie in Terence McNally's Frankie and Johnny in the Clair de Lune, a love story between 2 working people in a New York diner, a waitress and a short-order cook who find each other in the ordinary, imperfect middle of their lives. She won the Obie Award for the performance. Every word in the script fit her. The character was her. When the film adaptation was cast in 1991, director Gary Marshall told her, directly, to her face, in terms she has quoted in multiple interviews since, that he could not have her kissed on screen, because no one would believe it was romantic. The role went to Michelle Pfeiffer. She sat in an airport afterward and picked up a magazine, and Michelle Pfeiffer was on the cover. She has described that moment with the flat, accurate delivery of someone who has metabolized the humiliation without forgetting a single detail. She sat in the airport. She looked at the cover. She took the next flight. The 1980s produced the stagiarism that would make her, to theater critics, and to the actors who worked with her, one of the most respected performers of her generation. 2 Tony nominations. 3 Obie Awards, roles in Crimes of the Heart, in Night, Mother, in Frankie and Johnny, characters she built from the ground up, inhabited for years, handed over for the film versions to the canonical beauties of the decade. Sissy Spacek, Diane Keaton, Michelle Pfeiffer. Each of them occupying the screen version of a story Kathy Bates had lived in on a stage. And then, Stephen King wrote Annie Wilkes. Rob Reiner's adaptation of Misery went into production in 1990. The casting problem was the character, a former nurse, a devoted fan, a woman of terrifying conviction who rescues a novelist from a car crash and holds him captive in her farmhouse. She had to be, simultaneously, domestic and menacing, sympathetic, and monstrous, capable of sudden explosive violence, without ever losing the quality of a woman who genuinely believes she is acting from love. Every major actress in Hollywood was considered. Bates read for it. And something happened in that audition room that closed the conversation entirely. Because the quality that had disqualified her for conventional romantic roles was the exact quality that made her perfect for this one. The complete interiority. The absence of performance. The ability to switch, in a single breath, from solicitude to rage so absolute, it left no room for the audience to protect themselves from it. She got the role. Have you ever watched something you had been told was a limitation become the precise thing that made you the only person who could do what needed to be done? Because that is what 1990 was in the life of Kathy Bates. The limitation was the instrument. It always had been. The industry had simply not yet produced a role that required the instrument as its central feature. She won Best Actress at the 63rd Academy Awards. She was 42 years old. It was her first major film role. She stood at the podium with the specificity of someone who has waited a long time for a room to come to a conclusion she had already reached years earlier. She said, simply, and without inflation, that she had waited a long time for this. Then, she went back to work. The work that followed should have produced a floodgate. It did not. It produced a desert. She has used that word, desert. The offers that arrived in the years after the Oscar were character parts, supporting roles, the intelligent, textured, fully inhabited characters in the background of stories about other people. Fried Green Tomatoes in 1991. Dolores Claiborne in 1994, the most devastating performance of her early career, a woman accused of murdering her abusive husband, confessing across decades of memory, requiring the audience to hold grief and complicity and defiance in their understanding of the same person at the same time. Titanic in 1997, as Molly Brown, unsinkable, warm, the emotional counterbalance to the romantic center. Primary Colors in 1998, a second Oscar nomination, playing a political operative whose moral confusion was the most honest thing in the film. The industry had not revised its memory of what Kathy Bates was for. The Oscar was in the cabinet. The desert continued, and then the private losses began arriving. In 2003, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Her agent advised her not to tell anyone. A doctor close to the entertainment industry warned her that the stigma was real and the professional consequences of disclosure would be significant. She had the surgery. She had the chemotherapy. She said nothing publicly. She went back to work. She appeared in 6 Feet Under. She directed television. She thirgam, Gadina Mostoner Anavisturo, Widieran Parjoines, Barin Amoswiger. She apen, Iton muy mostas asintus 6 y apalborio, datipenine forricol, 9 tantiris, 9 orricol, on stage or spogdetifne statistorgegio. Izuldermiti simpatual, login sur shalonity or pardusor tatis television. She carried the secret the industry told her to carry. Because in 2003 the industry's position on female performers and illness was, this will cost you. In 2012, the cancer returned. This time, breast cancer, stage 2. Her mother had had a radical mastectomy. Her aunt had died of breast cancer. The family history left no room for ambiguity, and Kathy Bates left no room for hesitation. A double mastectomy in July of 2012. The removal of both breasts and 19 lymph nodes. The recovery was painful in ways she has described with an almost clinical specificity. A tube pressing against a nerve, weeks of unmanaged pain. The particular anger of a woman whose industry had cancelled her show while she was still on the operating table. She has said it was an awful time. She has said it with the same flat accuracy she applies to everything. Have you ever been through something so physically and professionally catastrophic that you had to choose, very consciously, between letting it define you and using it? Because that choice, made in a recovery room in 2012, without fanfare, and without an audience, is the hinge of the final act of Kathy Bates' story. The double mastectomy produced its own secondary diagnosis. Lymphedema. The lymphatic system, damaged during the surgery, produced a swelling in both arms that she recognized immediately because she had watched it happen to her mother. She has said, "I got hysterical. Not with grief, with recognition." She knew what this was. She knew what it had cost her mother, and she knew, from her own research and from conversations with her medical team, that the average medical school in the United States spends between 15 and 30 minutes training doctors to recognize it, across 4 years of education. That a condition affecting up to 30% of breast cancer survivors receives less preparation time in medical training than a typical chapter review. That women were suffering from it alone, in silence, because no one had told them it was coming and no one had prepared them for what it would look like. She became the national spokesperson for the Lymphatic Education and Research Network. She testified before Congress. She appeared at conferences and advocacy events and in interviews on every platform available. She received the Isadore Rosenfeld Award for Impact on Public Opinion alongside former President Biden and a leading researcher. She did not do this as a celebrity lending a face to a cause. Seno kommemengisei lymphedema enorospeno. Is understood, frososinsai, that ilaponabutan naverat manutornespora vinuuraboruartadia, boren aporusagar, ulmsmortii. In the absence of forcerseia, poetron nithua. The same quality that had made her Annie Wilkes, the total commitment, the refusal to perform the emotion rather than inhabit it, she brought to a Senate hearing room and said, "This is real and doctors cannot diagnose it, and women are suffering alone, and this must change." She said it the way she has said everything her entire career, without decoration, without performance, directly into the room. Ryan Murphy saw what she was doing and offered her 3 seasons of American Horror Story. Madame LaLaurie, in Coven, a 19th century Louisiana socialite of bottomless cruelty, given to Bates to inhabit with the same interior authority she had brought to Annie Wilkes 20 years earlier. She won an Emmy. Then, Ethel Darling in Freak Show, a bearded lady with a son she loves beyond her own survival. A character that required tenderness and loss in the same breath. Another Emmy nomination. Then, Iris in Hotel, the proprietress of a supernatural Los Angeles hotel, managing the supernatural the way very capable women manage the intolerable with controlled efficiency and barely disguised grief. Another Emmy nomination. And then, in the fall of 2023, she had one foot out the door. She has said this. Specifically, she had called her agents to discuss retirement. She was frustrated. Projects that had not found their audiences. A film experience that had left her depleted. She was not done, she has never once said she was done, but she was depleted. And the difference matters. And then a script arrived on a Friday afternoon, and she sat down and read it, and by the end she was looking at a bulletin board covered in photographs and intelligence and research, and she thought, "This is thrilling." She met with the showrunner Jenny Snyder Urman the following Monday. She came with questions. She stayed for 2 hours. She said yes. Matlock premiered on CBS in October of 2024. It drew nearly 8 million viewers for its first episode, the largest series premiere for CBS in more than 5 years. Within 2 episodes, it was renewed for a second season. In February of 2025, Kathy Bates won the Critics' Choice Award for Best Actress in a Drama Series. The show was also renewed for a 3rd season. In July of 2025, at 77 years old, her 14th Emmy nomination arrived. And the cast and crew were waiting with flowers. And the showrunner was in tears. And Bates said she had no expectations, and it was a badge of honor, and she had not seen Jane the Virgin, but had heard it was very successful. She is still here. She has also, between productions, continued her advocacy for lymphedema research and awareness. Noting in 2025 that research funding was under threat, and that the progress made over the previous decade was at risk. She said, "We were really making great progress, and I don't know what's going to happen now." She said it with the same flat accuracy she applies to everything else. She has 14 Emmy nominations, an Academy Award, 2 Golden Globes, 2 Emmys, a Tony nomination, 3 Obie Awards, a Critics' Choice Award, and a record that previously belonged to one of the most beloved performers in the history of American television. She lives in a historic Los Angeles house that once belonged to Bela Lugosi. She has said, "Of the people who once sailed past her in their gowns, now it is sweet revenge." There is something in the structure of Kathy Bates' story that is easy to miss because the recognition keeps arriving. The record, the Emmy, the renewal, the flowers. It is easy, now, to read the story as a story of patience rewarded, the long wait, the eventual acknowledgement, the career restored to its proper place. That reading is not wrong. But it is incomplete, because what the record, and the Emmy and the flowers do not contain, is the 20 years in the desert, and the 2 cancers, and the advocacy work in a Senate hearing room with lymphedema in both arms, and the Friday afternoon script that arrived when she had 1 foot out the door, and the Monday morning meeting with questions. The recognition arrived because she kept doing the work, but she kept doing the work before the recognition arrived. For 20 years, in a room that would not fully see her, without apparent expectation that the room would ever change. That is not patience. That is something harder and more specific. It is the decision, made once and then made again every day for 50 years, that the work itself was the point. That the woman who built Annie Wilkes and Dolores Claiborne and Frankie and Jesse Cates was not building them for the award that came from the work. She was building them because the work was the fullest expression of who she was, and she had not yet found a reason to be less than that. What is the version of the work that you have kept doing? Not for the recognition, not because the room was watching, but because stopping would have meant becoming something smaller than what you knew you were. Leave a comment below, because that is the question Kathy Bates has been answering since 1970 in New York City, and she is still answering it at 77, on a CBS soundstage with a forensic intelligence board on the wall and flowers arriving on Emmy nomination morning. If this story found something in you, subscribe and tell me in the comments which Kathy Bates performance is the one that changed what you understood acting could do. Because the greatest work she has ever done may not be on any screen or stage. It may be in the Senate hearing room, with the lymphedema in both arms, saying directly into the room the thing that needed to be said. In the same way she has been saying things directly into rooms since she was a child in Memphis who was told she was not conventionally attractive, and who decided, with the specific stubbornness of someone who has understood something the room has not yet caught up to, that she was not going to let that be the final word.